Welcome to MapCrow, the RPG art show. My name is Kyle, and today we're making an instant city map. And we're going to do it all using free software and assets from the internet. This video is brought to you by the generous sponsorship of Only Crits, but more on them a little later. I am elbow deep into a new 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons campaign, and it is all set in one city. I was really hoping that I was going to be able to draw my own city map, but I don't have that kind of time, so I just stole one from the internet. After a little bit of Google image searching, I found this beautiful map of Paris circa 1550 by Oliver Truchet and Germaine Hoyal. There are so many gorgeous, high-res historical maps floating around on places like Wikicommons, and they're very easy to convert to your needs as a dungeon master. I'm going to have a link in the description below where I will just list off a bunch of these high-res maps that you can use. I recommend finding a map that is labeled in a language that the people at your table do not speak, so any labels that aren't covered up aren't too distracting. I also recommend not using the entire city map. Go ahead and save that whole high-res image so you can add to your map, but just stick with like a quarter of one of these big medieval cities. The purpose of making a map like this is to give you, the GM, something to work off of, so you're not just starting with a blank slate and you don't have to explain every little detail about the world, but it is also to help avoid the analysis paralysis of just like a big list of places to go in a big old city for your players. At the beginning of a campaign, you really want to focus on just a few solid, interesting, evocative locations over just like coming up with every little thing that would be in a city. So pick an interesting little corner of the map and screen cap it. You want there to be a sufficient amount of buildings that no one could reasonably count it very quickly, but you also want there to be a few enough buildings that it seems like a local area, maybe like 3 to 5 neighborhoods or so. Now I like to print out my maps, so I'm going to open a new blank presentation in Google Slides and then go into File, Print Setup, and change the size of the slides to 8 by 10 inches, so it just fits on a normal sheet of paper. I paste in my screen cap from earlier, crop it down to size, and change the color to monochromatic. Now it's time to start labeling the map, and it's important to examine some of the genre tropes of fantasy maps that I think get in the way of playing the game. I have basically run out of patience for fantasy names. I can't make sense of them, and this may be because I have to deal with a reading disability, and if a word doesn't immediately make sense to me, I don't know if it's me or if it's the word or what's going on. So I like to remove those hurdles wherever I can. But to achieve that evocative nature that some of these old fantasy naming conventions have, I try to put words together in sort of a surprising combination that drives curiosity. So while I have lots of churches and taverns and plenty of very easy to recognize places, I also throw in some things like the eel sties or the brew goat stables or the gargoyle carving yard that it's just a little off kilter from what you would expect to see. And in my game at least, this has helped to drive curiosity about the world. Obviously we know that gargoyles are being carved in a yard, but who is doing it? Why specifically gargoyles? And it allows me to sprinkle in all the bits of unique world building that I have without just info dumping. This style of map is basically just a point crawl in a city, and it is designed to facilitate a specific style of play that one of my players suggested. They said that they wanted to play a game like Blades in the Dark, but using 5e. So that means that there's going to be a gathering information planning phase, and then the kind of major encounter for that, and then some downtime in the city after the encounter. So by labeling up a quarter of a city map with some interesting neighborhood names and place names, we have a pretty good start on giving the players places that they can investigate and questions to ask about the world. But it also helps me as the GM keep things straight as well, and it facilitates all of the improv that is necessary for this style of game. For instance, in the very first session of play of the campaign, my players instantly started using the map to start planning an ambush against a rival gang in their neighborhood. They knew that a convoy of these rival thieves was carrying a strong box of money going to drop it off to the Don. So one player went over to the gargoyle carving yard, got a cart of rocks and dropped it off in the middle of the road so they would have to choose a different path, past the brew goat stables. And that's where the druid decided to speak with animals and get the brew goats to stampede right on cue. All of my players are looking at the map, formulating plans, having these little role-playing scenes to set up their actions, rolling some skill checks to see how well it goes, and then into the encounter. I adore running games like this that are based around a central location. It's a lot easier to prep for, and it's also a lot easier to make the player's actions have consequences in the world that carry over from session to session. But there's one more twist that I want to show you when you're mapping a city in this way. But first, let's take a quick ad break and look at some beautiful dice from Only Crits. Only Crits is your one-stop shop for artisanal dice and dice accessories. They also give out a free adventure with your purchase. They have sparkly sharp-edged dice. They have dice with ducks in it. They have dice made out of stones. They have dice made out of metal. They also carry trays and bags as well. Pop over to Only Crits using the link in the description below and use promo code CROW for 10% off your purchase as a new customer. Thanks again, Only Crits, for sponsoring this video. So, I want to show you one more twist that is really easy to implement and adds a lot to your game. We're gonna map the sewer system of this city and we're gonna stock it with a bunch of cool stuff. Just make a new slide in the presentation, copy the whole map over to it, go over to Format Image, and then recolor it to color negative. When you copy and paste text and shapes over from one slide to the other, they paste in exactly the same coordinates. So if you wanted to have locations in your tunnels correspond to locations on the surface, it's really simple. In my most recent session, once my players started asking the right questions about what was going on in the sewers, I just handed them a map of the sewers. And once they realized that this lined up with the map that they already had, they audibly gasped with delight. And I gotta tell you, as a DM, that is what makes this all worthwhile. But one of the reasons why this map had such an impact is the location names down in the sewers were even stranger than the ones up on the surface. It wasn't just more of the same, it was broadening what this game could be about and the kinds of adventures we could have in it. The Sunless Leprosarium, the Smiling Walls, Loomtown, Brine Pools, the Hissing Nunnery. Some of these locations I have been leaving hints about since the very first session of the game, and some of them I just put in there because I thought they sounded like an interesting place to have an adventure, but I really don't right now know what is even going to go there. Those open, unplanned, evocative spaces are for all of us. It's for the table. It's a little treat to the future to fill in with our story together. I don't have to plan out every little detail about this world. And I think that's where we're going to leave it for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below if you find this kind of thing helpful. I'm always looking for interesting ways to share my process and share resources and tools so people can get the most out of their prep and focus on what they care about in their own games. I hope I can get back to designing my own game next video. It is the beginning of the teaching semester for me, so things are a little hectic right now. We'll just have to see how it goes. So until next time, my friends, farewell.